Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the regulatory section of the Planning and Regulatory Services Committee. Audio recording is being used to assist in preparing the formal minutes. Therefore, anyone participating in the meeting consents to it being recorded and being live streamed on YouTube. The first agenda is item 1, and that is apologies. I have been advised that Councillor Paul Duffy will not be attending. Is there any apologies from the floor? Okay. I think have Councillor Flaherty online yet? Not yet. Okay. I understand Councillor Flaherty will be joining us online. Agenda item 2 is declarations of interest, and we'll take these through as the meeting progresses if there's any to be declared. We'll move on to agenda item 3, and that is the report from the Head of Planning. And this is an information item. However, Robbie's going to take us through some points on this. So, Robbie, I'll hand over to you. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. So, yes, the planning statistics are there for review, but just wanted to just make you aware of some initiatives that are underway. We're looking at launching an agents forum to get feedback from agents that deal with us regularly on the service, and a survey of recent applicants to get their experience of working with us. We're also going to look at just enhancing these statistics and monitoring to give you a greater oversight of the activity of the team, and some other initiatives such as introducing performance agreements, so on major applications, setting out a schedule of meetings and contact with applicants to try and streamline the process and make those decisions a bit faster, and then just looking at reviewing processes and trying to reduce that overall caseload. So any items that do need your approval, I'll be bringing back later this year. Thank you.
Yep, thank you very much for that, Robbie. And that sounds an excellent idea. The agents forum it'll allow you to discuss ideas and applications, without the constraints of an actual live application. I'll bring in Councillor Armstrong at this stage.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Robbie, for that update, and I look forward to see how that progresses. Just have maybe one or two questions just in relation to leave of absences. I've been notified by a colleague that there's currently a couple of absences within the planning department itself, and there's issues with maybe cases not being transferred across, or that they're not progressing because people are obviously off sick or on a leave of absence. Just want to get an update. How many cases currently are in the system that are not progressing due to staff illness or leave of absence, and have they been transferred over to other planners within the department? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Armstrong. I'll bring Robbie in to answer them queries.
Yeah, thanks for that, Councillor. So it's a bit of a dynamic situation really on those. We are working where there are absences to transfer those cases across. The capacity in the team is tight, so trying to manage that and move things through in a sort of manageable way to not overload someone else, and just trying to manage customer expectations. If they receive a new case officer, they expect a service. So looking at priority cases and pushing those through where we can, and that will be changing sort of day by day. So I wouldn't have a number for you now, but we are doing our best to manage that. In a way, sometimes where it's shorter term, it's harder to manage because you're not clear that you do need to reallocate it. So once it becomes apparent that it's a longer term absence, then we do have to move to reallocating. So just trying to manage all of those factors and where people return, sort of bringing those cases back and picking them up again. So all of that is underway, and we're doing our best to manage customer expectations and process things as quickly as possible.
Thank you, Robbie. You're looking back in, Councillor Armstrong.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Robbie, for that update. Just maybe, if obviously you don't have the numbers, but if we can get a wee update, maybe an email, just see a breakdown of maybe cases that are probably sitting without a designated planner to deal with and move it forward, just to give us a wee brief overview of what's actually going on, and then obviously if there's issues that we need picked up in the next monthly meeting, we'll have a chat about it then. I think it'll be useful for most of people in committee just to see what's been sitting on the updating them. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Armstrong. Robbie, you indicated, so we'll bring you back in.
Yes, thanks, Chair. Yeah, happy to do that. As I say, will be a snapshot in time, but happy to share that and discuss the issues that are going on around that in more detail.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Robbie. Councillor Armstrong, you okay? Thank you. Okay, so that was an information item, members. So we'll move on to agenda item 4, and that's a report from the Head of Building Control. There's 3 street namings up for decision. I'd like to welcome David O'Prey along. Tom is not available today, so David will be taking these through the committee today. So, David, you've indicated to speak, so I will bring you now for the first one.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, members. Members, this is a request for the naming of a alleyway providing access to 8 properties addressed previously off Upper English Street in Armagh City. The applicant's preferred name for the alleyway is Lipton's Lane. The applicant's reason for the preferred name is that there was in existence one of the original grocery shops of the Lipton's brand, originally known as Lipton's Limited. There is evidence provided linking this shop to the immediate area as far back as 1907. This is contained in Appendix 1 along with the relevant maps. Whilst the Council's street naming and numbering policy does not, under normal circumstances, permit the incorporation of a person's name into a street name, officers feel that given the historical links to the immediate area and no links to the applicant, that in this particular case, the name Lipton's Lane would be acceptable. The applicant has petitioned each of the current residents, of which there are 8, and 100% of them have responded that they would support the naming of the alleyway and therefore their subsequent change of address. Recommendation is therefore for members to approve the name Lipton's Lane for this alleyway. Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much for that, David. And just to make members aware, where Councillor Flaherty has now joined us online. Is there any questions for David on that, or we're happy to propose in second? Proposed by Councillor Armstrong, seconded by Councillor Donnelly. Okay, we're all agreed, members? Yes. Thank you. Okay, we're moving on to 4.2, and at a street naming for Brea Grove, and I'll hand back to David for this one.
Thank you, Chair. Members, this is a request for the naming of a housing development consisting of 4 dwellings off the Tarthlogue Road in Portadown in the townland of Brea, County Armagh. Maps, etc. are contained within Appendix 3. The applicant's preferred name for the development is Brea Grove. The rationale is because the site is located within the townland of Brea and also within an existing orchard. Further orchard lands are situated to the rear and to the north of the site, fronting onto the Tarthlogue Road. Officers have assessed this application and deemed that it complies with our policy. Recommendation is therefore for members to approve the name Brea Grove for this housing development. Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to take any questions.
Many thanks, David. Is there any questions for David? Are we content to... Oh, Councillor Armstrong, I'll bring you in.
Yeah, no, thank you, Chair. Thank you, David. Just a question, really, on the naming, and it's probably a stupid question, but I'll ask it anyway. I know there's a Brea Lodge on the Guildford Road and out of Portadown. Is there going to be a confusion if we then have a Brea Grove in the opposite part of the constituency and even in the same county area? Just is there any confusion there that come up, or would that be taken into consideration? And same with the College Mews one coming next. I know there's College Mews maybe in, I think it's Lurgan area, I think, I'm near sure. Just that they sound very similar, and what would happen with postage and stuff like that, is that a consideration?
Thank you, Councillor Armstrong. I'll bring in David, because I know this happened before in Lennon Fields. There's a Lennon Fields in Banbridge and one in Lurgan as well. So Tom explained it at the time, but I certainly can't remember what it was. But David, you can maybe refresh us, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor. Yes, it does happen the odd time. The addresses are always put into the pointer database, so any of the blue light services that do need to be contacted for these developments do have coordinates and do have maps which are associated with all the different developments, so there generally isn't any confusion. Again, the post office have allocated different postcodes, which is what they use for their postal delivery, rather, funnily enough, actually the name. So they always do work off their postcodes, which are distinctly different.
You content with that, Councillor Armstrong? Okay. So, members, proposer and seconder for this one, please. Alderman Kennedy is proposed, seconded by Councillor Mutra. We're all agreed, members. Thank you. We will move on to 4.3, and this is the street naming report for College Mews. So, David, I'll hand back to you for this one.
Thank you, Chair. Members, this is a request for the naming of a housing development consisting of 30 dwellings off the Moray Road, Portadown, in the townland of Selsion, County Armagh. Maps etc. are contained in Appendix 4. The applicant's preferred name for the development is College Meadows. The rationale is because the site is located adjacent to the St John the Baptist College. Officers have assessed this application and deemed it complies with our policy. Recommendation is therefore for members to approve the name College Meadows for this housing development. Thank you, Chair, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much for that, David. I will bring in Councillor Lavery.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Armstrong asked sort of a similar question that I was going to ask in this one, because there is a number of college estates there in Lurgan, but there's no College Meadows. Therefore, I don't think we'd have the issue on this one, so I'd be content to propose it, Chair. I will proceed in College Meadows.
Thank you very much. Councillor Lavery, as proposed by Councillor Lavery. Have we a seconder? Councillor Donnelly has seconded. Okay, members, we're all agreed on that. Thank you very much. We will move on to agenda item 5, which is correspondence. There's 2 items in. 5.1 is the NIEA Planning Improvement Plan initial steps to provide an update on consultation timeframes, and 5.2 is the DFA Regional Planning Governance and Legislation Renewable Energy Workshop, which is next week. Is there any queries at all on them items of correspondence, members? Are we happy to note? Okay, members. Okay, thank you very much. Members, there is no notified other relevant business, so we will now adjourn for a short recess and we'll recommence at 4 o'clock to consider the planning applications. Okay, thank you. Okay, members, we're on to agenda item 6, and that's applications for planning permission to be considered by the committee as per the schedule of planning applications. I have to read the following statement. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the planning section of the meeting of the Planning and Regulatory Services Committee. Audio recording is being used to assist in preparing the formal minutes. Therefore, anyone participating in the meeting consents to being recorded and being live streamed on YouTube. Also, during the course of this section of the meeting, questions may be asked by councillors who are members of the Planning and Regulatory Services Committee, of planning officers, applicants for planning permission, objectors, or those speaking on their behalf. In doing so, councillors endeavour to ascertain the information which they feel is necessary to enable them to determine the application. However, members of the public should note that councillors will not reach a conclusion as to whether an application should be approved, refused, or deferred until the debate on that application has concluded. Okay, members, just to make you aware that 3 items have been withdrawn from today's schedule. I'll not read that. It's Appendix 3, 4 and 6. Okay, members, we have 5 items for decision. Appendix 1 we're going to defer until the second item because we need Councillor O'Kane here for that one. So we're going to start with Appendix 2 in the first instance. And Appendix 2 is application number LA08/2020/1566/F. It's from Dean Church on its refusal. Liam McCrum, our Senior Planning Officer, is to present report and PowerPoint presentation. An addendum report has been circulated, members. Councillor Joy Ferguson is to make a representation and objection to the application, and she will have 5 minutes. Martin Malone to make a representation and objection to the application. He has 3 minutes. Sheila Curtin to Plan NI to make representations in support of the application, and Sheila will have 3 minutes. Okay, so we will make a start on this one now, members. So, Liam, I'm going to hand over to you to take us through the report on PowerPoint. So if you indicate, Liam will bring you in.
Thank you, Chair. This application seeks planning permission for the retention of a shed for light industrial and storage use, including an access and yard, adjacent to number 70 metres north of 16A Roseville Road, Banbridge. This application is before members as has been called in by Alderman Berry. The shed in question is part block, part green cladding, which is of industrial appearance. The shed has a footprint of 30.5 metres by 15.6 with a ridge height of 6.2 above ground level. The floor plan of the building indicates that the southern extreme of the building, 75 square metres, will be used for B2 light industrial use, and the remainder of the building, 372 square metres, will be for B4 storage. This application site lies in the open countryside as defined by the area plan. The SPPS Edition 2 and PPS 21, along with PPS 4, are the principal planning policies for determining this application. Policy CTY1 of PPS 21 identifies a range of types of development which in principle are considered to be acceptable in the countryside. One of these is the development of a small gap in accordance with the CTY8 ribbon development considerations. CTY8 states that exceptionally, it may in certain circumstances be acceptable to consider the infilling of a small gap with an appropriate economic development proposal where this is of a scale in keeping with the adjoining development, is of a high standard of design and would not impact adversely on amenities of neighbouring residents. CTY8 sets out 4 sub-test criteria for development to be deemed acceptable. Each of these are considered in detail in the body of the report. Officers are satisfied that the proposed development complies with criteria 1, 2 and 4. However, officers consider that the 3rd test and the first part of the appropriate economic development test are not complied with in this instance. Officers consider that the proposal is contrary to policy CTY8 and CTY14 of PPS 21, as it will create a ribbon of development and adversely impact on the rural character of the area. Notwithstanding the above policy, CTY1 of PPS 21 also states that planning permission will be granted for non-residential development in the countryside in a number of cases. One of these is for industry and business uses in accordance with PPS 4, Planning and Economic Development. The applicant has submitted confidential information in an attempt to demonstrate that the proposal for economic development in the countryside complies with one of the policy tests as set out in PED 2 of PPS 4. That is, that the proposal should be permitted in exceptional circumstances. The applicant's case involves sensitive information and is considered in the confidential addendum which has been provided for members on decision time. Officers having assessed the submitted information do not consider the proposal should be considered as complying with policy paid to due to exceptional circumstances. As set out in detail of the body of the report, officers are satisfied that the proposed development is acceptable in terms of access and parking, flooding and drainage, and impacts on natural and built heritage. Officers have also considered that it is appropriate in terms of impact on residential amenity, subject to a number of suggested conditions. Consideration of all representations is set out in detail in the report. Refusal is recommended for the stated reasons, and members are advised that an enforcement notice has been served on this development. The applicant has appealed the terms of that notice, which includes ground A under deemed application. We'll take a run through the PowerPoint. So this is our site location plan. You can see the Craigavon Road just to the north of the application site is outlined in red. Just the location of the site within the general area. Again, you can see the main Craigavon Road just to the north of the screenshot. Just an aerial view of the site. You can see the position of the building. Sort of blown up view of our aerial. And again, you can see the location of the building sandwiched between the applicant's dwelling and the number 16A. This just shows the separation distances to the two closest sensitive receptors, 52 metres there to number 16A. This is our site layout, and you can see the position of the shed in situ with the dwellings of the objectors and the applicant. This is the shed as built on the ground, and you can see the floor plan indicating the areas of storage and the areas of industry. This is the front elevation of the shed taken from inside the compound, looking back towards the access laneway. This is the gable end, looking from the applicant's property towards the shed. That's the elevation of the shed that backs on to the private laneway at the point of access. And again, that's the applicant's dwellings, just looking from the sort of gable elevation of the shed. And just another view of that with the existing laneway shown in situ. This is the internals of the shed, where you can see the positions of various pieces of machinery and various pieces of items that have been used for storage. Similar again, showing the areas of storage and the areas where the machinery is located. And the same thing again. That's the point of entry from the private laneway that runs up. You can see residential properties to the right and to the left. Our shed is up over the sort of brow of that hill and into the right-hand side. This is a view from the Roseville Road. It's probably difficult enough to make out, but you can just see the shed in situ. And again, another view from an aspect on the Roseville Road. Again, you can see the shed in situ. That's a view from the rear of 16, looking back towards the shed. You can just see it in the foreground there. Thank you.
Liam, thank you very much for your report. Members, I'm now going to bring in Councillor Joy Ferguson to make a representation and objection to the application. Councillor Ferguson, you're very welcome today. You will have 5 minutes on which to speak. After 5 minutes, I'll stop the clock and your microphone will be cut off, so don't take it personally, it's in the protocol, okay? So, Councillor Ferguson, when you are ready to speak, the clock's set. So.
Thank you, Chair. And good evening, everyone. This is a retrospective planning application for a light industrial and storage unit sited in a greenbelt location, not on zoned land, for economic development, the definition and purpose of which has been changed twice by the applicant through a 5-year retrospective process. This has led to a lack of openness and transparency for planning personnel and statutory agencies to properly assess the application, bringing us to this position in 2026, approximately 5 years after it was erected. The industrial unit is located in a countryside location, situated on road defined by the Department for Infrastructure as narrow, unclassified rural road. A road not purposed for additional and industrial traffic, a road that is already in poor surface condition. This application is contrary to CTY 8. It is not an appropriate economic proposal within a small gap or infill site and does not qualify as economic development in the countryside in exceptional circumstances. The distance between 16 and 16A Roseville Road is almost 140 metres, exceeding the area typically required to accommodate 2 houses within a built-up frontage. Therefore, the application cannot qualify as legitimate infilling of a small gap in site under CTY 8. A substantial and continuously built-up frontage does not exist, as the laneway accessing the shed terminates after the entrance to 16A, where a field begins. The dwelling at 16A and its garage do not front any laneway, therefore there is no continuous frontage. The laneway itself terminates at the entrance. It is at 16A, it is a field entrance and a former entrance to a previous farm, which has never, ever resembled an established built-up frontage. In fact, the addition of the shed creates a ribbon development, as the definition includes buildings sited back or at a staggered angle if visually linked or have a common frontage. This contravenes CTY 14. The size of the applicant's light industrial shed is not in keeping with the development pattern and occupies 475 square metres of a 2,000 square metre plot with a ridge height of over 6 metres, a much higher plot proportion and height compared to the neighbouring homes, which all face north, with the industrial unit itself facing west. Therefore, the size, scale and placement are at odds with the established and existing patterns of development and should not be considered an exemption. The proposal is not appropriate for countryside development and is contrary to policy PED 2. The proposal is not an established economic development use, it is not the redevelopment of an established economic development use, and it is not a major industrial development, therefore not permitted under PED 3, 4 and 5. In respect of PED 6, the proposed shed is not beside the settlement limit and there is no evidence of community regeneration or consideration of other suitable sites. CTY 8 also states there should be no adverse impact on the amenities of neighbours. Firstly, the nature of the site was located beside the neighbour's fence, with the maximum distance from the applicant's own home. Secondly, the nature of the industrial unit gives way to valid concerns on noise, dust and odour. The scale of the building itself, the manufacturing processes it's described, and the heavy-duty equipment which Environmental Health have confirmed in their report all combine to cause serious concerns for neighbours' homes and their amenities. Noise, dust and odour are an infringement on the quality of life of residents, and any imposed mitigations provide fragile reassurance to residents given the retrospective nature of this build without permission. Thirdly, drainage and flooding have impacted the immediate neighbourhood, and this section of the Roseville Road has already suffered from flooding, and since the erection of this shed, flooding has increased through runoff from the site, which has impacted the quality of the road and the neighbours' amenities. Given the 5-year retrospective nature of this case and the continual delays, I would urge members to support the planning recommendation to refuse this application. This application harms the rural character and environmental integrity of Roseville Road. There are no valid or applicable exceptions. It is not considered a gap or infill. There is no substantial or continuously built up frontage, and the addition of the shed creates a ribbon development that does not respect the existing pattern of development. Simply, the shed should not have been built without permission. Refusal is the only option. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ferguson, and you were well within your time there. Okay, members, we're going to move on next to Martin Malone, and Martin is going to make a representation in objection to the application, and Martin will have 3 minutes. Martin, you're very welcome to the committee today, and like Councillor Ferguson, unlike Councillor Ferguson, you have 3 minutes, and once the 3 minutes is up, Martin, the microphone will be cut off, so if you can confine your remarks to 3 minutes, we'll be very grateful. So,
okay, thank you. Yes, as a local resident, I'm just objecting continually to the erection of this retrospective application for an industrial unit which is in the countryside. Roseville Road's a rural residential area serviced by unclassified B roads. And as you can see from the photographs, there's grass up the middle of those roads. It's a very narrow road. Not only is it a very narrow road, it's a road that you actually, in order to access the premises, you actually have to make 4 right-hand turns on narrow roads, which is cutting up the banks and damaging the infrastructure around that as well. And that's really an important part of it. The secondary bit for me really is around the quality of the road. The site continues to have runoff water that runs down out of the field, and I've lived in this area for 35 years, on this road and in this property for 35 years. We never had runoff out of the fields onto the road. Yes, you get some water runoff whenever you get bad weather coming down the road, but not out of the fields. It's continually running out of the field onto the road. And there's a hill right down to the bottom of the road, which is like a river. And if you have had a chance to look at any of the videos that I've sent in, it is a river. It then collates at the very bottom of the road on a flat and creates a flood, which effectively you cannot get through. You have to go round the other end of Roseville out over the top of it to access the Scarfer Road. So there we have this continuous aspect from that. Obviously, as a resident as well, and looking at the environmental report, you can see this is an engineering business. It's an industrial unit that's being done, and that impacts not only from a noise perspective, and it's not really designed for this type of usage in this rural area. There is industrial sites within less than 2 miles from this building, which is really zoned and designed for industrial use and for commercial use. Where we are living and where this is located is not in any shape or form designed for a manufacturing or an engineering business of any scale. And the unit itself is not in keeping with the countryside and the green belt zone that it's in. And I would just urge planners that we continue with the refusal and councillors the refusal of the application. Thank you.
Martin, thank you very much, and you were well within your time there. Members, we're now going to move on to Sheila Curtin from 2 Plan NA to make representations in support of this application. Sheila, you're very welcome along to our planning committee today. You've been here before, so you know you have 3 minutes, and once the 3 minutes are up, the microphone will be turned off. Can you indicate to speak, please, Sheila? Okay. So, Sheila, once you begin speaking, the clock will start.
Chairperson and committee members, thank you for the opportunity to speak. This application falls to be assessed under CTY 8. It allows for the infilling of a small gap with an appropriate economic development proposal. Officers have rightly accepted that the site is located within a small gap for the purposes of CTY 8. Whilst there are 4 refusal reasons, the sole concern behind each of them is whether the scale and pattern of development is acceptable in this location. This is a matter of judgment for members. No issues are raised in respect of amenity, and all consultees, including the Environmental Health Department, are content with the proposal. This case comes down to whether the proposal is suitable in this location. We say it is suitable. It does not cause any demonstrable harm. CTY 8 clearly envisages the possibility of economic development like this in small gap sites in the countryside. This is suitable and supports rural economy. By its nature, economic development proposals are not akin to domestic properties, with their scale and design often inherently different to residential properties due to their operational needs. CTY 8 clearly allows for economic development within infill sites. It does not require a direct equivalence in size to their other surrounding properties. Assessing the scale of the proposal as a mathematical assessment in terms of the footprint compared to the adjacent dwellings is not viable or realistic for economic development proposals. It is not what the policy explicitly requires either. Scale is not merely a measurement of height or width, but an assessment of what the proposal looks like from public vantage points. The site is located on a private laneway owned by the applicant. The case officer's report confirms that the shed is similar to other industrial and agricultural buildings within the rural area and does not occupy a prominent position in the landscape. From public and private vantages, this proposal does not protrude above any ridgeline, benefits from a backdrop of rising land, and is visually linked with the applicant's dwelling. The proposal in this sense accords with policy. It would respect the existing development pattern by sitting comfortably within a small gap site. It is of a scale that is in keeping with adjoining development when viewed properly in context. Members are invited to view this proposal from a local businessman positively. It is a modest countryside development which is necessary to sustain a local business. It is not causing any demonstrable harm. No statutory consultees object. The sole concern relates to scale and pattern of development. The effect of refusing this application is to leave the shed vulnerable to forced demolition through enforcement. This would be a disproportionate outcome for a building of this nature, and it would have a very significant impact on the applicant, family, and his business in the council area. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Sheila, and again, you were well within your time. So members, you've heard from our planning officer, you've heard from objectors and a representation in support of the application, so we'll move on to any questions. So is anybody wishes to start with any questions, please? Councillor Wilson, I will start with you. I'll begin now.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a question for Sheila. In this building, is it just storage, or will there be any manufacturing taking place, or has there been any manufacturing taking place? Thank you.
Thank you. I'll bring you in, Sheila. Just have to go through the chair. I'll bring you in now, so bear with me.
What's in front of us today is an application largely for storage and only 75 metres for light industrial, which Environmental Health have confirmed that there's no impact on amenity. I suppose I should also say that any additional concerns could be conditioned.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Sheila. Councillor Wilson, okay. Alderman Candy, I will bring you in next.
Thank you, Chair. I was just wondering, for Liam, Councillor Ferguson stated there that this application's in the system longer than 5 years. What has been the delay in getting it this length?
Okay. Alderman Kennedy, I'll maybe start with Liam and maybe bring Councillor Ferguson out if she wishes to come in, but in the first instance, I'll go to Liam.
Yep, thank you, Chair. Essentially, the nature of the application changed a number of times. The applicant, the applicant in this instance, had started out with a particular type of business during the COVID years, and this was seen as his response to COVID when the nature of his business changed and he couldn't afford different things, and so basically this shed was built as a response to that. Our understanding is that the nature of his business changed. We conducted a number of site inspections, so it started out as an industrial unit solely. Then his business practice changed, so there was an element of storage associated with it. So the nature of the application, Alderman Kennedy, changed about 3 or 4 different times. And then there was a number of different consultation responses that needed new reports. And obviously we've got to the point where there was a concern about this building becoming immune. So that's why the enforcement notice was served, to sort of safeguard the council in that, look, that stopped the clock. That meant that, look, we have a notice on that site, we can take appropriate action if needs be. But the longevity of the application being in the process was for numerous factors, but majority of them were because the actual nature of the application changed about 2 or 3 different times because of the change in nature of the applicant's business.
Okay, thanks very much for that, Liam. Alderman Kennedy, I'll ask the objector and Councillor Ferguson if they want to comment on the questions as well. Is that all right? Just to get maybe their perspective on it. Councillor Ferguson, do you wish to come in as well? And Sheila, I'll bring you in next after that if you wish. Okay. Let's see.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, thank you for your question, Alderman Kennedy. Yes, the purpose of this building has changed over the 5 years. The building was built in 2020, and the retrospective planning application was submitted in 2020 as well. And it has been difficult for, as I mentioned at the beginning of my remarks, for planning personnel and for statutory agencies to actually understand what is happening in this building because of the change in purpose. And that has added to the delay in consideration and the frustration, as you can imagine, for neighbours to try and understand what is happening. Their concerns around what is going on in that building are quite valid, because you can see the pictures that have been displayed relate to some quite heavy industrial equipment, which have been verified by the environmental health in their report. So the purpose of the building is crucial, and the use of that equipment in that building is also crucial to the impact of the neighbours. So it's a really pertinent question. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ferguson. Sheila, do you wish to comment on this? Or, okay, if you indicate, I'll bring you in, Sheila.
Yes, so in terms of delays, as most us know that applications as they proceed through the system, even if there's no change of description, there's a lot of additional information required to try and satisfy the objections. More detailed reports were constantly requested, and the applicant put in a lot of investment into this application to get the statutory consultees content. For instance, there was 2 acoustic reports prepared, the second of which detailed additional acoustic measures proposed. So I think the delay is not just based on the evolution of the applicant's business, it's also based on the evolution of reports that were submitted during the processing of the applications to make sure that all the statutory consultees are content.
Thank you, Sheila. Alderman Candy, you were looking back in, so I'll bring you in now.
I thank you, Chair. Was planning aware of the construction of the shed before it commenced, or were you just aware of it after the retrospective planning application had come in?
Thanks, Alderman Candy. I'll get Liam back in now.
No, Alderman Kennedy, the application that we have in front of us tonight was submitted because there was an enforcement investigation that was ongoing. So this was an attempt to sort of find a resolution for the applicant on foot of an active enforcement case, which is still actually open.
Have that, Alderman Candy? Okay. Councillor Lavery, you're in next.
Thank you, Chair. I suppose I have 3 questions, 2 for Liam and then maybe 1 from the objector, Martin. So the 2 from Liam would be, in the reports mentioned that that maybe it's alleged the applicant could have been doing other things rather than just build this large shed at their property. Could planners maybe go into a bit more detail about what those other options could have been? I know maybe the objector mentioned other industrial premises nearby and so on, so what maybe could have been done rather than going down this route? Second question, I think Sheila said, it's up to the own person's perspective in terms of how you would classify this as a large or relatively large development in terms of shed. Have planners done that based on like ridge height of the building, square meters in terms of the business being occupied? Sort of what has led planners to come to a conclusion that it's a large shed? So those 2 for Liam, and then 1 for Martin would be, it's been alleged here that this is storage, or nearly all storage, rather than manufacturing industrial. Has that been the lived experience of the residents in that area so far? Is it mostly things being coming and going, dropped in and picked up? Or is there like things being made, things being developed, engineering signs and so on coming out of that structure? So those 3 questions, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lavery. Liam, I'll bring you in first to answer them 2 from Councillor Lavery.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of the other options explored, Councillor Lavery, we don't really have much detail on that. Essentially, I think what Councillor Ferguson's probably alluding to is the fact, and the objector, is that there are industrial premises within the settlement limit of Banbridge. We don't have any information that a discounting exercise, for example, has been carried out, that there was, I suppose, an attempt to rent premises elsewhere. I think the only information we had was that the applicant did have premises within Kernan before COVID, and it became too expensive for him to retain them. So that, as a result, resulted in the build-out of the shed during that period. But with regard to exploring other options, the information we have is very scant indeed. It was just that this was a response to having to relocate from previous facilities that they had in Kernan. In terms of the character, I mean, you're quite right in terms of the size and scale of the shed. Character is, as members will be aware, is very much a personal view of how you view the site within what is the established frontage that we're dealing with here. So there is an established character within this frontage that is exclusively residential. And what we have here is a large-scale industrial unit that has an element of storage and distribution and light industry. And our assessment as officers was that we felt that that building within that defined frontage was out of character. And that's really what we're looking at. It's not the wider character of the building within the countryside, it's the character within the defined frontage, and that's what we're assessing here in the context of this application.
Thank you, Councillor Lawry. Martin, I will bring you now. Your second question was for Martin, wasn't it? So, Martin, if you indicate to speak there, I will bring you in now.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm not in the shade, so I don't actually know what the split is between it, between storage and thing. All I can say is that there is regular vehicles every day going to the premises. I think the concern for me as a resident would be by the very nature of the fact that this business has changed 4 or 5 times and is evolving in the period from 2020 to now and continuing to evolve. The business could evolve into completely engineering, and therefore there's very little storage in it, and who's going to monitor that aspect of it, because this is a business that, by the sound of it, by the nature of the applications that have been submitted and resubmitted, is likely to continue. So that would be the fear from a resident's point of view.
Martin, thank you very much for that. Sheila, I know you've indicated to speak, but the protocol is that you have to be asked a question. So, Councillor Lawry, I'll bring you in again. No, I'm bringing the wrong councillor in. Hold on a minute. Councillor Lawry, yes, go ahead.
Still green, yeah. I mean, yeah, I suppose before, just based on what Liam said there in terms of, you know, the site selection and what other options were identified, as maybe one, maybe for the applicant or the agent, so maybe refer that question to the agent then, why, suppose, go to this option rather than consider other, you know, industrial sites and so on of that nature.
No problem. Councillor Lawry. Sheila, if you indicate to speak, I'll bring you in to answer that.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, it's important to note that there's no requirement under CTY 8 for to demonstrate alternatives. There's no requirement under that policy, for example, the sequential test that you have in other policies. So, A, we were never asked for that, asked to submit that information, and secondly, rightly, we were never asked because there's no requirement under the policy to supply that information, because it's not a test in the policy, and to apply that would be incorrect. And secondly, with regards to the use and the evolution of use within the building, it's important to remember that the application in front of us is as what is described, and anything, if, for instance, if that application changed, if after approval that the application changed, then that would be for enforcement to look at, or for the applicant to submit an amendment. But today we can only assess what is in front of us today. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Sheila. Okay, Councillor Armstrong, I'm going to bring you in next.
Thank you, Chair. And it's a question for the agent. You mentioned in your opening remarks that this would have a negative impact on the family and the business itself. Can you expand on what those impacts could be if this was refused today? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Armstrong. Sheila, if you indicate, I'll bring you in.
I suppose they have invested a lot of money. They submitted, or they constructed the building during a time during COVID, whenever their business that they had built up completely decimated overnight. It was a business that they had spent a lot of years investing in, and obviously it's their sole income. The applicant has a young family. His wife works with him. It's his livelihood. So I suppose anyone can understand if someone's livelihood is taken away from them, especially given that we're dealing with a subjective issue here. It is just down to scale of the building, accessed only via a private laneway, which can be visible only from a private laneway, which is owned by the applicant. It just seems unreasonable that we are going to this extent in terms of, especially considering that all the consultees are content, and I can't enforce that strongly enough.
Thank you very much for that, Sheila. You can tempt Councillor Armstrong. Okay, maybe one question, Liam, in terms of myself. Under the plan and policy statement, you know, to your mind, what would be an exceptional circumstance? Because the plan application is for, as it says, light industrial and storage use. You know, the best will in the world, I can't see that being as exceptional circumstances. I know there was talk of this during COVID, but the type of industry that's going on in there, you know, to your mind, what would make an application exceptional? What would the definition of that be?
Chair, that is a very pertinent question, but I don't think there is a defined answer to it. I mean, each case is treated on its own merits and it's site-specific. So what may be an exceptional case in one sense that applies to one application may not apply to another. So the onus is really on the applicant to come up with what makes this particular set of circumstances exceptional. And as you'll see in the report, the confidential addendum that was circulated, we've assessed that information, and officers have determined, in our experience, whether we felt that met our exceptions test, and we felt that it didn't. So I suppose it kind of relates back to what, you know, Councillor Lavery had asked, and the agent had said, you know, yes, there's no policy requirement to do the discounting exercise, but as part of the exceptional case that you would be making, you may wish to do that. You know, and that's the kind of stuff that you may expect in that. But I mean, there's no hard and fast rule that makes an exceptional case an acceptable exceptional case, if that makes sense.
Yep, Liam, thanks very much for that. Councillor Wilson, to bring you back in.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a question to Martin. In your opening remarks, you mentioned flooding on part of the road. How far is this flooding that you've mentioned from the actual building in question? And is there any evidence to back up maybe your thinking that this flooding was a result of this building being constructed? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. I will bring Martin in now.
Yeah, well, as I say, I've lived on the road for 35 years. The flooding has increased substantially from it. If you look at the plans of where his drainage takes it to, his drainage takes it down to the side of 16 Roseville Road and finishes there. And it's from that point in the field that the water exits out through, which isn't his field, I don't believe. It's another person's field, I believe, out through the side of that, and is also breaching across into 16 and now out onto the road. That never happened. Didn't happen ever before. You would have had some water run down. If you go to that point, there's another hill that runs beyond that. You would have had historically, there would have been some water would have run off down the road, but not out of those fields. So the only thing that has changed is the erection of this building.
Martin, thank you very much. Councillor Wilson. Okay, members, there's no further lights on. You know, this will be your last opportunity to ask a question before we move into the debate stage. So if we've asked all our questions, members, we will move into debate stage. So if you care to share your thoughts at this stage before we move into a decision. So I will bring Councillor O'Dowd in first.
Thank you, Chair. It's more just a comment. I really don't understand, even during COVID, how anyone can think they can build and not have permission. I just don't see the logic behind it. I understand that it's someone's business and everything else, but people just can't go about building where they want, when they want, even during COVID. So that's just something that's kind of niggling at me a wee bit. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Dowd. I'll bring in Councillor Wilson next.
Thank you, Chair. This isn't the first retrospective planning application we've had from my time in planning. I'm sure there's been a few, even in domestic settings where people have built extensions, etc., onto private properties and have asked for retrospective planning permission. Just in my opinion, when you look at the pictures here, the building isn't very visible. It's well below the height of the actual access laneway. Any of the pictures that I can see from here on the presentation, you can't even see it from the bottom of the laneway hardly, and maybe a bit from elevation on up the Rosevale Road. I know down the road a bit on the right hand side in the Blue Road, there's an industrial engineering buildings which is tucked in beside some residential properties. I'm just sort of thinking of more of maybe a site visit to give us a wee bit more of an outline of what the actual building is, what it looks like in situ, what it's going to be doing, because maybe some of these issues could maybe have addressed under some sort of conditions. So I'm leaning towards a site visit, so we'll have a wee bit more information and look exactly what's going on. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. I'll bring in Councillor Lavery next.
Thank you, Chair, and I'd just like to start off by thanking Liam, the objectors, and Sheila again for presenting. It's certainly been a very informative one for me. I suppose overall I think that the officer's recommendation for refusal is the correct one in this instance, and that it does impact on the sort of residential nature of that area of the Rosevale Road. For me, it does stand out like a sore thumb. For me, it does contribute to what I would call large-scale industrial premises or manufacturing premises or storing premises, but certainly large-scale for that relative area. It is a remote area. It is outside of any other settlement limits, and for me, it doesn't meet a number of the planning criteria which has sort of been outlined by officers, and we've gone through it in detail in this afternoon and in the report. So for me, I believe the officers have sort of got it right. I think we've all the information here to take a decision here today, and the pictures are pretty clear as far as I'm of the view. So that would be my thinking. Sure, I'd be leaning towards.
Sorry, Councillor Lavery, you just cut you off at the end, but I think we got you. Is that all right? Okay. Members, I suppose it was a very interesting debate and there's some good questions asked, and I do thank the objectors and the support for the applicant for coming forward today. I would tend to lean towards what Councillor Lavery has stated. You know, the report is quite clear. I don't think a site visit would illuminate any further the size and scale of the building. We can all imagine how large it is in that rural setting. So I think, you know, it's quite practical for us to make a decision on this application today. But we're not at the decision stage yet. That'll come now. So there's no further lights, so nobody else has indicated to speak, members. So without further ado, I'm going to move into the decision stage on this application. Councillor Wilson, I will bring you in first.
Thank you, Chair. Just for our own information, that I propose we have a site visit. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much for it. Oh, sorry, Ian, your mic. I'll get you to repeat that. Sorry, I could hear you all right, so I assumed it was on.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. I would just propose that we have a site visit. Thank you.
Thank you very much for repeating that, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Lavery, I will bring you in next.
Thank you, Chair. As sort of stated in the earlier part of the meeting, I think on the balance officers have got it right, and the application should be refused as outlined by the reasons are in the officer's report. So I'd like to propose we accept the officer's recommendation to refuse the application.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lavery. Councillor Armstrong next.
Yeah, I'll just second Councillor Wilson's proposal.
Thank you, Councillor Armstrong. I'll bring in Councillor O'Dowd next.
Thank you, Chair. And I'm going to second Councillor Lavery's proposal that we accept the recommendation from the officer. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor O'Dowd. So, members, we have got two proposals on the table. Because Councillor Wilson's was proposed and seconded first, we will take his proposal for a site visit first. So we will get the voting opened forthwithly. You'll see it on the front of your screens. Okay, folks, that's the voting closed. So once we have the results, I'll let you know. Okay, members, so there was a total of 13 votes. Or sorry, no, there was actually 12 votes, and apologies. There was yes was 5 and no 7. So there was no vote no for that site visit. So members, then we move on to the second proposal, which will require another vote that we accept the officer's recommendation. So we will open the voting shortly, or well now. So if you wish to vote, members. Okay, members, in relation to the proposal from Councillor Lavery to accept the officer's recommendation, there was a total of 12 votes. 7 voted yes and there was 5 abstentions. So the recommendation is accepted by the committee. Okay, members, so we're going to move on very shortly to the next one. I'll let the objectors on agent leave for this one. Members, we're going to be moving on to Appendix 1. Appendix 1. Okay, members, we're moving on to Appendix 1, in which there's only 4 members who can take part in it, so I'll be vacating the chair. Councillor Lavery, I assuming you're going to say that you're not be taking part in this. Guys, know what I'll do? I'll just call out to go through them. So, Councillor Mulholland, you weren't there, so you're not be taking part in this. Alderman Rankin? Well, this is a matter of choice to take part in that. I'm not saying so. You're free to stay if you wish, but Councillor Armstrong, you declaring that you weren't there either. Okay, Councillor Moutre, Councillor Wilson, Alderman Candy, you're here for this. Councillor Lavery side, Councillor McKeown side, Councillor O'Kane and Councillor Fergal Donnelly are left. So I'm going to hand over the chair to Councillor O'Dowd, members, and once this is through, we'll be back. Good luck. All right, Mary.
Gurmy Lamunkett. We only got buffer every minute, so you'll be all right. Yeah. Okay, everyone. Everybody's made their declaration, so we are in Appendix 1, application number LA08 2024 03280. This is a return application, and you've all got the unbeing report circulated. There was also a confidential one circulated. So we will need a proposer and seconder for this. If you, I think it's Liam. No, Roisin. Roisin, sorry. Roisin, if you want to take us through it, please.
Thank you, Chair. Members will recall this application was deferred at the January Planning and Regulatory Services Committee to allow for a site visit to take place. And that site visit was held on Thursday the 15th of January 2026, and the following were in attendance: Councillor O'Dowd, Councillor Donnelly, Councillor O'Kane and Alderman Kennedy, and Roisin Hamill. Details of the site visit are set out in more detail in the report. Further to the site visit, the applicant has also submitted further information with regards to the personal circumstances of the applicant for consideration. A confidential addendum has been circulated to members. Policy CTY6 allows for dwelling in the countryside for the long-term needs of the applicant where there are compelling and site-specific reasons for this related to the applicant's particular circumstances and subject to 2 criteria being met. It must be demonstrated that the new dwelling is a necessary response to the particular circumstances of the case and that genuine hardship would be caused if planning permission was refused, and there are no alternative solutions to meet the particular circumstances of the case. You will see in the confidential report a letter from a doctor has been provided setting out the applicant's medical issues and a list of medication. While officers are sympathetic to the circumstances presented, the case put forward is not considered sufficient for a dwelling to be considered as a necessary response to the particular circumstances of the case. As set out in more detail in the report, officers are of the view it has not been demonstrated that genuine hardship would be caused if planning permission were refused. No evidence that alternative solutions have been investigated or ruled out. Officers will recommend that the application be refused for the reasons set out in the original report and the additional reason of refusal relating to CTY6 as set out in the addendum report. And I'm happy to take you through the presentation again, members. And obviously you see our site there within the general area. This is our site location plan that was submitted with the application site outlined in red there just at the bottom of the map. So obviously this was originally submitted, you'll recall, under the clustering policy, and officers accept there is a cluster of development at this location, and you can see that clearly demarked on the drawing. And that's just our cluster analysis of where the cluster of development is. And that's an aerial photograph of the site within the already area. You can just see it with the red arrow to the site there. So this is a view of the cluster development on approach from the north, and obviously you'll recognise this from having been out on the site, members. And again, this is a view of the site just from beside Cologne Primary School. And just a view of the site from number 9 Red Rock Road is a view of the site again. And that's it in the context of number 9 from the Red Rock Road. And that's it just viewed from the opposite direction, looking at it from number 42 Red Rock Road. And this is from Building on Tradition, the guidance document that demonstrates what are acceptable cluster developments and what are not acceptable cluster sites. And you'll see the ones in the purpley are unacceptable as they're on the edge of the cluster, and they're not bounded by development on 2 sides in the cluster, and they're not absorbed into the cluster. And the ones in blue are what are considered to be acceptable. Okay, thank you, members.
Thank you, Roisin. Do we have any questions for Roisin? I'll ask Alderman Kennedy. Just bring you in.
Thank you, Chair. Just come back on the location of the cluster, Roisin. I think the applicant's been a bit hard done by here because it's part of the school grounds, and the school is within the cluster, and the field, in my opinion, was part of the school grounds, and there was actually an access passage across the back of the applicant's house to access the ground, but the Education Authority had sold her that wee access point. Why they haven't sold the school, nobody knows, but that's irrelevant to hear today. But I think if I was the applicant, I would have felt a wee bit hard done by the fact that it's still, the field is still within the school grounds and it's not been counted as part of the cluster, is my opinion. But you know yourself, you said that the definition that day we were out is how we define the cluster, and I myself think like the applicant is living in an old schoolhouse. The field run round the back of her house to the side of her house, and in my feeling it's still part of the school grounds. So I think it should be in part of the cluster, but that's only my opinion, maybe.
Thank you, Chair. And look, yes, I appreciate where you're coming from. However, the policy requires that a number of criteria are met for it to comply with the policy. And you know, in our view, there's two of those criteria that it simply doesn't meet. It's not bounded by development on two sides within the cluster, and it's not absorbed into the existing cluster. It's on the edge of the cluster. And you know, if there were a dwelling approved here, then what would stop the next one and the next one? And that's the whole point of those criteria that are set within the policy. So from our point of view, it's not absorbed within the cluster, it's not bounded by development on two sides in the cluster, therefore it creates a ribbon of development and it, you know, changes the character of the area, and that's why we're recommending refusal on this one.
Councillor Kane, you're looking in?
Thank you very much, Roisin. Roisin, the confidential information we received, it doesn't hold as much sway, am I right in saying, to overturn this? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. There is a policy for special and domestic circumstances, and that's set out in PPS 21. However, again, there are a number of criteria or a number of requirements for that policy for us to be able to consider that would, you know, might be recommended for refusal. What they have given us is just basically some medical information as to, well, obviously can't go into details as to issues that this lady has. However, there are certain things that they should be giving us to sort of demonstrate that genuine hardship would be caused here if we were to say no to a dwelling here, that they have looked at all other solutions, that, you know, that there's so much care needed here that a house is the only response here to the circumstances, and we simply don't have that information. We have very limited information. They haven't told us even who the main carer is going to be. We haven't got any medical information as to what that level of care might be. They haven't ruled out other alternatives such as an extension or a temporary solution. They haven't really said why a house, you know, in Armagh would be, you know, would not suit the particular circumstances. So we simply don't have that information to allow us to approve this under CTY 6.
Thank you, Roisin. I'll just bring in Alderman Kennedy again.
Thank you, Chair. It's just got along the same lines as Councillor O'Kane here on the medical issue. The day, I was going to say Councillor Nicholson, but Sam, the architect, he stated that day that there was a degenerative condition. But there's a few medical terms there I wouldn't be that familiar with. They've always a habit of putting stuff in fancy words.
Can we just earn caution there, because there might be something there that's confidential? So if we need to go into confidential, we will. So will Alderman Kennedy, if you want to go in, it's not a problem. No problem. Can we have a proposer and seconder to go into confidential? Proposed by Alderman Kennedy, seconded by Councillor O'Kane. Online viewers in accordance with Schedule 6 of the Local Government Act. We will now be moving into confidential session of the council. This means that we will be turning off the public feed of the meeting. This will be returned when the meeting is restarted. Can I ask that ICT officers turn off the live feed and confirm with me when the confidential section of this meeting can proceed? That's good. Okay, thank you. Alderman Candy will bring you back in again, is that okay? Because we just need to re-ask that question, if that's okay.
Forgot what my question was now. You've got me off the beaten track. What down the age? Oh yeah, sorry. I said that there wasn't a curtilage of enough space on site for granny flat type, small extension type thing, and that a new build would really be the only option if there's no room, you know, around it. But it's back to square one again. And it's not a big.
Look, I take the point you're making, but I don't think we could say that, you know, there's no options here in terms of, I mean, there is room for an extension, the garage could be converted, so, you know, none of those options have been explored, none of those options have been ruled out. I mean, it's a fairly sizable house, you could put an extension on there. We don't know how many people live in the house at the minute, we don't know how many people would need to live in the annex. We simply don't have that information, you know, so I couldn't say that those options have been explored with us, no.
I'll just bring you in again, Alderman Kennedy, if that's okay.
I think the stated the day the applicant was here, she stated that her son and daughter-in-law were home from England and with the child living with her, and I think she said there was another child on the way, I think. I'm not just 100% sure, you know, but like it was, I made the house like, it's a full size at one side, but the other side's only like a half a house. And if there's already 4 people in it and another one on the way, it wouldn't really be that big a house, I don't think, for too many, you know. But
one thing, sorry if I can make it. You had said, Roisin, that they could have even, well, as a suggestion, put a garage, the garage, converted the garage or something like that. That would have been beneficial to them, in your opinion, do you think, rather than a whole new build?
Thank you, Chair. Well, it's an alternative to a new dwelling. It's an alternative solution that just simply hasn't been explored, that, you know, hasn't been ruled out. We haven't been told why that wouldn't be suitable.
I'll just bring you in again, Alderman Kennedy.
maybe we can flick back there just to the photo shoot of the house just to see what the options was regarding. I don't know what part it was on page. What page? The last one.
Just checking now, Alderman Kennedy. I think it's number 10. I think the garage was just at the other side of that. I thought there was a garage at the other, there was a garage at the other side of the house. Okay. Roisin, can you confirm if there is a garage there or not? you just want to indicate, Roisin, I'll bring you in.
Sorry, Chair, yes, I do believe there was a garage there, but I suppose the point I'm making is these are all options that we're talking about here tonight that have not been explored by the agent. You know, the policy requires the agent to do a certain amount, or the applicant to provide us with a certain amount of information, including levels of care, and including exploring other options. We don't have that. And, you know, I know we're talking about it tonight, and maybe there is other options, but that simply hasn't been explored.
Thank you, Roisin, and that would actually be up to the applicant and the agent to explore rather than council to find solutions, in my opinion. Is there any more questions? No? Okay, Councillor O'Kane, sorry. Bring you in now.
Thank you, Chair. Roisin, am I right in saying you're mainly toning it down because it's on the edge of the cluster rather than in the cluster? Is that correct?
Yes, effectively, it's on the edge of the cluster, so it's not bounded by two sides of development within the cluster, and it's not absorbed into the cluster. So yes, effectively, because it's on the edge of the cluster.
Thank you, Roisin. Councillor O'Kane, are you okay with that? Do you want to come back in? You okay? Is there any other questions? No? Will we go then to a decision? Alderman Kennedy, I'll bring you in.
Thank you, Chair. I'm still sort of sticking in my guns here that if it's in the curtilage of the school area, I think it should have been in the cluster. If it's part of the school grounds, and the school grounds is part of the cluster. So, I throw a spanner in the works. I propose we go again off our recommendation.
Okay, Alderman Kennedy, I'm actually going to propose we go with the officer's recommendation because it isn't bound right round and we do have policies for this. So I will go with the officer's recommendation. Councillor O'Kane, I'll bring you in.
Thank you very much, Chair. I will second that. I would like to, Mr. Kennedy, as Alderman Kennedy says, we'd like to get it past the lady, but I don't think the evidence and the evidence given by the planner is, I think it's too strong at the moment.
Can I just clarify that you are seconding that proposal? Yeah. Mine or Alderman?
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm happy to second the Chair's. Councillor O'Dowd.
Yeah, thank you. I don't think I have to go into that vote. So we all agreed on that proposal that we will go with the officer's recommendation? Okay, so then okay. So we have went then with the officer's recommendation that we refuse that. Thank you.
Okay, members, we're moving on to Appendix 5. This is application number LA08 2020/1192/F. It's from J.H. Turkington and Sons, and it's up for approval. Roisin Hamill, Principal Planning Officer, will present report and PowerPoint presentation. An addendum report has been circulated as well. Jimmy McAdam from McAdam Stewart Architects to make a representation in support of the application, and there's written representations in objection to the application have been received from Grace Riley. Okay, so Roisin, I will hand over to you to start with your report and PowerPoint presentation.
Thank you, Chair. This application is seeking planning permission for a housing development comprising 3 detached and 16 semi-detached dwellings at 172 Tandragee Road, Portadown, and includes lands to the south and adjacent of 172 and to the west of 170 and 178 Tandragee Road. The application is being presented to committee tonight as it has received 5 objections from 4 separate addresses and is recommended for approval. The application site is located within the development limit of Craigavon urban area on white land. The principle of housing complies with the provisions of the Craigavon area plan, and the proposal to develop the site for residential purposes is acceptable. The site contains a large detached 2-storey dwelling, number 172 Tandragee Road, and a number of trees which are protected by a TPO. A significant number of trees, 10 in total, have previously been removed from the site. 8 of those were TPO'd. This represents a loss of almost half the trees on the site. The current proposal involves the removal of 4 more trees due to their health and condition, and 3 to facilitate the development, albeit their condition isn't great. An amended landscape plan was submitted in September 25, showing the planting of 31 new trees, as well as planting of shrubs and hedging. A tree survey report has been submitted which details the existing trees to be retained, root protection areas, trees to be removed, and the location of protective fencing. In considering the proposed layout, officers are of the opinion the proposed development is acceptable in that it complies with the area plan, the SPPS, and policy QD1 of PPS 7, and the addendum to PPS 7. Following consultation with DFI Rivers, officers are satisfied the proposed development will not adversely affect drainage. The development will take place outside of the 100-year floodplain, and there will be no impact on the floodplain, flood storage, and no impact on flood levels elsewhere. Therefore, the proposal complies with the policy provisions of PPS 15. Based on the findings of the submitted ecological surveys and the advice received from NED, officers are content the proposal is not likely to harm a European or national protected species and complies with PPS 2. A condition requiring the mitigations proposed with the bat activity survey to be carried out has been included. A number of objections have been received, and all of the matters raised have been considered in the report and the addendum report, which was circulated earlier today. And officers will recommend that the application be approved, and I'll just take you through the PowerPoint. So you can just see the site, the arrow notes where the application site in the context of Portadown. This is the red line of the application site, and it probably looks like an arbitrary red line, but it's been drawn to ensure the site lies outside the floodplain. And this is just an aerial view of the site, and you can see some of the remaining TPO trees are still within the red line. So this is the site layout plan, and you'll see there are areas of planting incorporated within the site to replace some of those TPO trees that have been removed. And this is the landscape drawing that's been submitted with the application. And this is one of the proposed house types and proposed floor plans, and you can see they're in keeping with dwellings in the area. So this is a view of the site looking straight into the site. That's number 172 Tandragee Road, which is obviously coming away. And this is a view of the site from further down Tandragee Road, looking again up towards number 172. And this is a view of the Tandragee Road again. It's accessed off the main Tandragee Road. And a view of the site, another site just looking across at the existing house, number 172. And this is looking towards number 170 from within the site. This is up at Woodview Avenue, looking down across the site, sort of looking towards the south. And another view just from Woodview Avenue. And another view of the site from Woodview Avenue. And again, looking back towards the houses at front onto the Tandragee Road there, 170 and 170A. And just another view looking towards the Tandragee Road. And this is the business that exists at the bottom of Woodview Avenue, which we've considered in our report. And these are a view of the TPO trees from the Tandragee Road. And that concludes the presentation. Thank you, members.
Roisin, thank you very much for that. Okay, we're going to move on, members, to Jimmy McAdam from McAdam Stewart Architects to make representations in support of the application. Jimmy, you're very welcome to our planning committee today. If you indicate to speak, I will bring you in and then you will have 3 minutes, and once the clock stops, Jimmy, the microphone will be switched off. So if you hit that button, we'll get you brought in now.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I am here this evening representing the applicant and speaking in support of the application, of course. I'm the agent on the scheme, and I've been working on this scheme with the planning service for over 5 years now. This has been a long, drawn-out process due to the amount of consultations and studies that's had to be carried out on behalf of the applicant. This has put the applicant to great expense, but it has resulted in hopefully a positive outcome this evening. The various consultations and studies carried out all had positive outcomes. One of note, of course, is a problem that we're having throughout the borough at the moment, which is the NI water sewer capacity. We went through the wastewater impact assessment on this and had a successful outcome. So we're one of probably the few housing schemes available at the moment that has been able to resolve our sewage network and infrastructure problems. Councillors, if approved, this scheme will provide 19 starter homes, for which we know there's a great demand in the borough. It's also going to provide the borough with quite a large construction investment to produce this development and create further employment throughout the borough. So, short statement this evening, councillors, but I would like to recommend this application to you for approval, and I'm very happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Jimmy, thank you very much for that, and you're well within your 3 minutes. I'll start the ball rolling. Jimmy, as you're here in support of the application, and there's been concerns raised about flooding in that location. And I note that it did flood a few years ago, but it is outside the 100-year floodplain. And as we know now, 100-year floodplains seem to be decreasing in time, and there's a lot more floods. Are you very confident that, subject to approval, that there will be no issues with flooding on this site? I'd just like to have your thoughts on that issue. So I'll bring it up. Sorry, Jimmy, if you hit that again, I bring you in.
Yes, I'd be confident that all flood issues have been addressed in the consultations, and the specialist consultants that we brought on board, who are obviously experts in their field and within Northern Ireland. So I'd be confident that the evidence put in front of the planning service is positively supportive of the floodplain. The development, as you see, is a sort of a regular boundary to it. And from the very start of this process, we were very aware of the floodplain, and we have therefore concentrated the development in the safe zone. There's also obviously within floodplains, there's a freeboard area which sets your house floor levels above the flood level, so there's also a safety factor built into this.
Jimmy, thank you very much for that. Councillor Lavery, I'll bring you in next.
Thank you, Chair. And I suppose, I don't know what question, maybe both to Roisin and to Jimmy, and it is on the issue of flooding. I remember the floods there at autumn 2023, and this area was impacted greatly. Indeed, I remember visiting this site. I actually visited twice, because where Old Golf Links is, which is just south of this application site, the sort of road was sort of completely flooded across at that point. I know that I think it's Armagh United Football Club were really badly impacted. Old Golf Links was impacted, so you had to view different each side. You had to go up the Tandragee Road one way and then go back around the circuit route and go the other way. And I think I remember seeing this field partially flooded, albeit the southern end of it, maybe outside the red line. But given that flooding is a huge concern in this area, we've certainly seen this application, and anything associated with Tandragee Road, that's certainly on our minds. So last night I went on to the fluvial floodplain maps on the website there, and when I was looking, I can see what you mean, the line was sort of been drawn to exclude what was on that website, but when I added the filter regarding fluvial plains when taking into account climate change, it covered about half of the site. So my concern is that we'll continue being told that climate change is going to increase factors regarding flooding, the sea levels potentially rise and so on. So has the officers taken into account any potential climate change concerns which will result in greater flooding incidents, which according to that, the website there, when it was taken into account, seemed to impact on it. Because I'm sure when the likes of the houses were built in old golf links, for example, might have been outside of the floodplain at that time, but they're certainly inside it now. And those conversations you had with residents at that time were heartbreaking, because that's their home, difficulty selling it, difficult getting insurance and so on. So my concern is that if we sort of approve this when it's technically outside the floodplain, but when there's potential change over future, it may be impacted by flooding. And as you mentioned, these 100-year flooding incidents are happening a lot more common frequency than that. So I have sort of concerns that we could be potentially given a false safety net for residents of this development, as it seems that maybe those climate change factors haven't been considered, but I'd like clarity from officers on that, because it's certainly a big concern of mine here, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Lavery. Roisin, I'll bring you in if you could potentially answer them queries.
Yes, and obviously Councillor Abbott is concerned. But look, obviously we work within the confines of PPS 15, and policy FLD 1 does say that development will not be permitted in the 100-year fluvial floodplain. So obviously that's what we have to work to, and the flood maps show us that. And the site lies without the floodplain. I appreciate what you're saying about climate change, and I suppose that's why the freeboard's built in, that the levels would be above the flood levels whenever they're eventually built. But at this moment in time, it's outside the floodplain, and that's obviously what we considered. Now, the drainage assessment has been sent to Rivers Agency. They have seen it, they've commented on it, and they're satisfied that the development will take place outside the floodplain. There'll be no impact on the floodplain storage and no impact on flood levels elsewhere.
Thank you for that. Roisin, Councillor Lavery, looking back in.
Yeah, it's maybe just, you asked Jimmy the similar kind of question, but his view on it, looking forward in terms of the longevity, if there is these climate change concerns, which it appears that according to the website I was looking at last night, there is.
Oh, okay, Councillor Lavery. I'll bring in Jimmy if you wish to address that further. If you indicate to speak, I'll bring you in.
Yes, I agree with Roisin. All the information and data that we have available and consultants have available indicate that this site is suitable for development. And as Roisin says, the freeboard is your safety factor, and that's always taken into account. It has gone through the various government consultees. It's not just our opinion here, it's gone through all the various departments, including DFI Rivers. So it's all positive feedback, and yes, we're all aware of flooding, etc. But this site and all the predictions are, including climate change, it will not flood.
Jimmy, thank you very much for that. Councillor Lavery, you content? Alderman Candy, I'll bring you in now.
Thank you, Chair. Road Service has no objections, but one of the objector states has been several accidents close to this site. Is there any evidence from Road Service to back up that there has been several accidents at this site, or have they maybe only been minor?
No worries, Alderman Candy. I'll bring Val in. We've got Val. Val, if you indicate, I'll bring you in to speak.
Thanks, Chair. We have no evidence of any recorded traffic collisions at that location. We have no objections to the site. Meets the criteria on the DCAM 15. Parking, etc. is also fine in it. So DFA Roads have no concerns regarding the application.
Val, thank you very much for that. Are you content, Alderman Candy? No problem. Okay, members, I can't see, is there any further questions in relation to this application? Okay, I don't see any lights on, members, so we're going to move to the debate stage. I'll maybe start the ball rolling, members. I'd like to thank Roisin for her report and Jimmy for answering the questions. And I think Roisin clarified the issue quite succinctly when she says we have to deal with the policy that's in place currently. It would appear that this area isn't in the fluvial 100-year floodplain at this current time, so that's what the assessment's based on, and I think we'll have to be very cognizant of that. And I think in terms of the mitigations that Jimmy outlined, they make practical sense. So I think on balance, the officer recommendation to me would be the appropriate one. So I will bring Councillor Lavery in for his thoughts as well now.
Thank you, Chair. I suppose in my own mind I would be very cautious on it. I would like to get further confirmation from DFI Rivers on the potential climate change impacts of this application. Because I said when I did go onto the website, and I'm sort of looking at it now, it does appear to be, and when you put in that climate change filter, to be some of the partially covered. I know it's maybe outside of the current listed 1 in 100 year fluvial plain, but I'd just like to satisfy myself rather than get into a situation where we approve this application and then residents end up in difficulty in 20 years' time being flooded out. I would just like that final confirmation from DFI Rivers regarding the potential climate change impacts as sort of put on the website. So I would like to defer the application for further information from DFI Rivers regarding climate change impact. That would be my mindset on it.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lavery. I'll bring in Councillor Armstrong next.
Yep, thank you, Chair. Sort of along the same lines as yourself, we're looking at, we judge this application on the evidence that's in front of us, not what might happen in 150 years' time or what might happen with climate change and projection of climate change. So that we have to take into consideration of where it's on now. If it's not within that floodplain, the 100-year floodplain, I think we're in the right trajectory of going with the officer's recommendation. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Armstrong. I'll bring in Councillor Moutray next.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I suppose I'm just cognizant that this is a very thorough report. There have been no objections from consultees ultimately, and there obviously has been a drainage assessment carried out. DFI Rivers have not raised any objections, so going on that basis, it seems pretty clear to me that officers, they're satisfied as well that this application will not raise any detrimental impact upon drainage and there'll be no real obvious flood risks posed here. So I'm certainly content with that, and I think that'll be drawn into the decision that I make on this application.
Thank you very much. Councillor Moutray, I'll bring.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, along the same lines, I think we have to go with what's in front of us in the report. You can't sort of use a crystal ball looking into the future, and there is a need for starter housing in that area. So I think it's along the same lines as these other ones here. I'll go with offer the recommendation.
Thank you very much, Alderman Kennedy, for that. Okay, members, there's no further lights on. So we've had our questions, we've had our debate. We'll move on to the decision. Is there any proposals from the floor at this stage? Alderman Kennedy.
Happy to propose we accept the officer recommendation.
Thank you, Alderman Kennedy. I'll bring in Councillor Moutray next. Okay, you hit your button again. I've knocked you off. Sorry, it's my fault.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'd be happy to second that proposal from Alderman Kennedy.
Thank you very much, Councillor Moutray. Councillor Lavery, I'll bring you in next.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to propose we defer the application to obtain further information from NI Rivers regarding the potential impact of climate change on the fluvial floodplain for rivers, to put my own mind at rest, because we don't want to get in a situation where we approve things and then turns out 20 years down the line we didn't do all of our research that we could do. I think deferring for a month to get further confirmation from DFI Rivers isn't a big ask, so that's what I'd be proposing, Chair. I would not support a decision being made on it today.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Lavery. We have a proposal that has been seconded by Alderman Kennedy and seconded by Councillor Moutray. Have we a seconder for Councillor Lavery's proposal? Unfortunately, you can't. I don't need to dig out standing orders for that. Okay. So, are we going to vote here? We're not agreed? Okay. So, because Alderman's Kennedy's proposal was put first and seconded by Councillor Mitry. We'll be taking the vote on that. And should this vote pass, your vote falls then, Councillor Lavery. Okay, so when the lights come on, members, please vote. Or Alderman Kennedy, looking at it again? I still need a vote because we've put on this rodeo before, so we'll just do the vote and have everything above board. Yes, that's the pretty recommendation. I've done this before. Have we one left now or two left? There's two. One's in the council, one's before them. You got that council staff to put the applications in their wives' names or something like that. I don't know, or their partners' names or their husbands'.
Just saying, when home after is to go to bed.
I know. Well, you shouldn't have came over at all.
I'm sitting here in the sweat, literally.
And you see, if you give it to me, I was sitting outside your house honking a horn for 12 hours solid.
Right, I'll give you a bottle of milk and spice.
The paper was actually hot there.
That's hot as the press, quite literally.
We should get you a pair of roller skates.
Oh, okay, members, so the votes are in. So there was a total of 12 votes, and there was 11 in support of the officer recommendation, and there was 1 vote against. So the recommendation is outlined in the report is approved. Okay, members, so we are moving on to application 7, and that's LAO 8/2023/1781. And it's from Heather Copeland. It's up for approval. Roisin Hamel is going to take us through the report in the PowerPoint presentation. An addendum has been circulated as well, members. Andy Stevens from Matrix Planning Consultancy to make representation in support of the application. And we also have the following in attendance, and they'll have speaking rights for clarification purposes. Sorry, Councillor Lavery, I'll bring you in now.
No worries, just to clear that I was contacted by a objector a number of years ago, but I passed them on to a colleague and didn't express a view on the application, so they can take part.
100%, Councillor Lavery. Just to finish off, the following are also in attendance and have speaking rights for the clarification purposes only. It's David Herr, and he's the agent. And the written representation and objection to the application have been received from Roger Bacon. Okay, so I'll just wait on Andy and David coming in then, and then we'll make a start, members. Okay, members, we've got everybody in and settled. So, Roisin, I'll hand over to you to take us through the report and the PowerPoint presentation.
Thank you, Chair. This application is for a site for a dwelling and a garage adjacent and north of number 48 and opposite and west of 47 Spring Hill Road, Lurgan. The application is being presented to committee tonight as it was called in by Alderman Baxter. The application site lies in the countryside outside any settlement limits and is comprised of an agricultural field. There's a single-storey dwelling and garage to the south of the site and a roadside vernacular dwelling to the north of the site. There's a 2-storey dwelling and farmyard opposite the site. The application has been assessed against CTY 8 of PPS 21, which allows for the development of a small gap within an otherwise substantial and continuously built-up frontage. As set out in the report, officers are satisfied there is a built-up frontage along this section of Spring Hill Road, comprising the dwelling and garage to the south and the roadside dwelling to the north. Taking into account the plot frontage of adjacent development, officers are satisfied the gap is capable of accommodating no more than one dwelling and respects the existing development pattern. There have been 12 letters of objection received, 10 from one address, 1 from a second address and 1 from an MLA. All of the matters raised have been fully considered in detail in the report. One of the concerns raised relates to the dwelling and farmyard on the opposite side of the road. However, officers in consultation with environmental health are satisfied that while there may be some amenity impacts associated with farmyard activity, the planning applicant would be fully aware of the likely amenity impacts, and a refusal based on these grounds could not be sustained. Officers are recommend that the application be approved subject to conditions. And I'll just take you through the PowerPoint. And the red arrow denotes our site within the general area. You can see Dollingstown over to the west. And this is the red line of the application site as submitted. And this is just an aerial view of the site. And this is a concept plan that has been submitted in support of the application, and you can see the dwellings that we consider to be the frontage, which is the garage to the south, and the dwelling to the south, and the dwelling to the north. So this is a view of the site. This is standing on the road looking directly into the site. This is a view of the site from further down the Spring Hill Road. This is a view of number 48, so that's the dwelling and garage that contribute to the built-up frontage. And this is the building to the north of the site. And this is on the opposite side of the road, so this is opposite number 48. This is the farm. And this is the farm on the farmhouse on the opposite side of the road. And then there's just another view from the north looking down towards the site on the right-hand side. And just another view of the site further on down. And that concludes the presentation. Thank you, members.
Roisin, thank you very much for your presentation and the PowerPoint presentation. Okay, members, so we're going to move on. Andy Stevens from Matrix Planning Consultancy is here to make a representation in support of the application, and also David Herr, the agent, is here for clarification purposes only. Gentlemen, you're very welcome along this evening. And Andy, you've been here before, so you know the protocol. You've got 3 minutes once the clock starts, and after 3 minutes up, the microphone will be turned off. So if you can keep your comments to 3 minutes, we'll be very grateful. So if you indicate to speak, Andy, I will bring you in.
Thank you, Chair, members, for giving me the opportunity to speak in support of the application. We are fully supportive of the recommendation to grant planning permission before you today for this single infill dwelling. While the application has been in the system for a while, this is reflective of the careful consideration by officers in applying the planning policies to the specific circumstances of this site and using their evaluative planning judgment as outlined in the committee report, which is both comprehensive and robust. Officers confirm the proposal is compliant with all aspects of the local development plan, regional planning policies, resulting in no demonstrable harm to any interest of importance. As such, the presumption in favour of development is engaged and permission should be granted. Whilst there has been one objection, they have been afforded significant opportunity to express their concerns, which have been fully considered by consultees and officers. Whilst they appreciate that change can be difficult to accept, the planning system does not exist to protect the private interests of one person against the activities of another. There are no objections from any of the statutory consultees to the proposal on road safety, environmental impact, flooding, built heritage or residential amenity grounds. No evidence has been presented by third parties to the contrary of these expert opinions. Planning decisions can only be taken in evidential contexts, and all the evidence, including the positive responses from the statutory agencies, would indicate that there is a lack of sustainable objections to this proposal from a policy or impact perspective. The planning officer's report engages with all the relevant matters, considers them with balance and against the correct evidential and policy context. The report reaches a conclusion that is both rational and sound. Taking account of all the material facts, the proposal is compliant with planning policy and specifically the lack of demonstrable harm to landscape, road safety, ecology, drainage or amenity. We fully support the recommendation to grant permission before members and would respectfully ask that you as a committee endorse the conditional grant of permission. Thank you for your time, and myself and David Herr are happy to answer any questions you may have.
Andy, thank you very much for that, and you're well within your time. Okay, members, so you've heard the report from Roisin and you've heard the comments from Andy there. Is there any questions? Councillor Lavery, I will bring you in for the first question.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Roisin and Andy. I suppose just have the 2 wee questions for Roisin. I suppose when I was looking into the history of the application, it seemed that it came forward with a recommendation for refusal on one of the delegated lists some years ago, and then we're here now with an approval recommendation. So could officers maybe walk through what the mindset was to initially refuse the application and then what changed in terms of getting us here to the approval recommendation before the committee? And then the second query is just regarding the third building, the garage. So as pointed out, with 2 sort of dwellings, one to the south, one to the north, which sort of fairly established, albeit the one to the north there, you know, it's unlived in, but it is a sort of dwelling at some stage. And then the third building being used for the infill policy is this garage. Has council sort of case law or decision sort of standards in terms of garages being included? Because when some people think of a building, they may not necessarily consider a garage. It might be more of a house type structure. So just those two questions for Roisin. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lavery. Roisin, I will bring you in to answer them two questions.
Thank you, Chair. And I suppose the answer to both of the questions is kind of linked, because the two questions are nearly kind of linked. Obviously, the first question was why was it on the delegated list initially with a recommendation to refuse? And it does come down to the impact of that garage and whether or not we feel that garage contributes to the built-up frontage. And I mean, it is quite a small garage. It is set back. It is quite close to the house. And initially, whenever the initial case also looked at it, the view was that it didn't contribute to the built-up frontage. However, in looking at looking at subsequent PAC decisions and older PAC decisions, and the PAC take the view that ancillary buildings can form part of the built-up frontage if the plot on what they sit abuts the road, and if they have a presence and they front the road and they are a separate building. They don't have to have a separate curtilage as long as they're a separate building and appears a separate building. So in light of a lot of those PAC decisions, we went out and looked at it again, and a number of officers have looked at this, and we've come to the conclusion that it does contribute to the built-up frontage. It sits back from the dwelling, but it's not right behind the building line, and it's not behind the dwelling. It sits to the side of the dwelling. It does have a presence in its own right. The plot on which it sits abuts the road, and in our view, it does contribute to the built-up frontage.
Councillor Lavery. Okay, thank you very much, Roisin, for that. Member, is there any further questions in relation to this application? Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. Just in relation to the garage, Roisin, is that an interpretation of that building, and can it be interpreted in another way? I know you're going by previous judgments. And the other question is to road service. I see here that DFI had identified forward visibility concerns and a safer alternative access, which has not been properly considered. That option would reduce the old building's frontage. Has that been, what is the situation with that? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Wilson. I'll bring in Roisin for the first part and then I'll get Val in for the second, okay? Roisin, I'll bring you in.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. Yes, it is very much a judgment based on the characteristics of the site and based on the site-specific circumstances. In our view, that garage does have a presence in its own right. And, that's based on a number of PAC decisions, numerous PAC decisions where the PAC have accepted that ancillary buildings can have a presence in their own right. It's also based on judgments that we've made on other applications ourselves and other applications that probably have been went through committee. So yes, it's experience and the site specifics of each site and their own individual merits.
Thank you, Roisin. Val, could I bring you in on the road safety issue that was raised there?
Thank you, Chair. I've actually been out at the site, and initially where the access was proposed on the draft plan, it wasn't achieved in the 70, but it's an outline application, so we basically condition it that it has to meet the criteria on the RS1 form, so it can be achieved. The access can be achieved to the standard that we require.
Thanks very much for that, Val. Happy enough with that, Councillor Wilson? Thank you. Okay, members, there seems to be no further lights on, so that is your questions asked, and we move into the debate stage on this application. So, is there any thoughts on it to date? Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. Just in relation to this is outline planning permission and the access issues as well, on the proximity to a farm. And I know it had been raised concerns by the objectors that in the future this could have an impact on possibly expanding their business. And we've seen other applications close to farms having issues. I'm concerned as regards from the agricultural end of it. This is a family business and they want to expand. Anybody residing there could possibly put in objections or scupper any future plans. Personally, I think, looking at the maps and where the building is proposed to be located, having a wee look at where it actually is and proximity to that farm buildings might be worthwhile. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Wilson. I'll bring Councillor Moutray in next.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'd be happy to second that proposal from Councillor. Oh, sorry, we're not. Sorry, I've jumped the gun there. But yes, I would generally agree with the direction of travel there. I do think a site visit, if we're opting towards that, would be a useful exercise for members to carry out, just to visualise it on the ground and to see what's being experienced here from the objector's point of view.
Okay, members, anybody else wish to share any thoughts? If not, we will move on to the decisions stage in relation to this. Is any proposals or counter proposals on this? I'll bring in Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. I propose that we have a site visit for this application. Thank you.
Councillor Mutry, bring in next.
Yes, happy to second, Chair.
Are there any other proposals? Councillor O'Dowd, bring in next.
Thank you, Chair. I think we've got all the information here in front of us. Like, we've Val from DFI, and I know Roisin's done her homework as well. And I don't see how a site visit would benefit us any on this occasion. So I'll say no to a site visit. I will propose that we don't have one.
Councillor O'Dowd, could you just propose officer recommendation? I sought some legal advice. We can't propose a negative to the previous one.
Apologies. I will propose we accept the officer's recommendation.
Thank you very much, Councillor O'Dowd. I'll bring in Councillor McGill next.
I'll just second Councillor O'Dowd's proposal.
Okay, members, so we've got two proposals on the floor. We're not going to get agreement, so we're going to go to a vote. And as Councillor Wilson's proposal was first, we will vote on that first, members. So that's what our first vote will be in regard to. And it is for a site visit. So you're voting if you want to go on a site visit or not. Okay, members, the votes are in, and voting for a site visit was 6. Voting against a site visit was 6, and under the protocol of the standing orders, the casting vote falls to me then as chair of the committee, and I voted no to a site visit, so that proposal falls. We'll move on to Councillor O'Dowd's proposal now that we accept the officer recommendation. So we will put that to a vote now, members. So if you can vote to accept or not accept the officer recommendation. Okay, members, so the vote is in for a vote on to accept the officer recommendation. There were 6 voted in support of the officer recommendation. There was no votes against it, and there were 6 abstentions. So the officer recommendation has been approved. Okay, so Andy and David, thank you very much for your time this evening, and safe home. Why would I don't know. Okay.
Here, what do you think you would do if it chased him out and wanted to He told me it wasn't allowed to leave early.
Okay, members, we're moving on to the final appendix of this evening. This is application number LA08 2025 1352F. Paul Conway's approval. It's before committee because it is an employee of the council. So I'm going to hand over to Roisin so she can take us through the presentation in PowerPoint.
Thank you, Chair. This application is seeking planning permission for the erection of a single-storey extension and external seating area at 133 Ballygassoon Road, Loughgall. The application is being presented to committee tonight as the applicant is related to a planning officer. Officers have considered the proposal against the policy provisions of EXD1 of the addendum to PPS 7 and are satisfied the proposal is sympathetic to the host property in terms of scale, massing, design and external appearance. Given its location, the proposal will not unduly affect the privacy of neighbouring residents, nor will it impact on any landscape features. Sufficient space remains for in-curtilage parking. No objections to the proposal have been received and no concerns have been raised by any consultee. Officers are recommending that it be approved, and I'll just take you through the PowerPoint. You can see where the site is in the general area near Loughgall. This is our site location plan. You can see the site there outlined in red. And that's just an aerial view of the site showing the existing dwelling. And the layout plan on the right shows you where the proposed extension is to go, so it's that wee green shaded area. So these are the existing elevations of standard single-storey dwelling. And these are the proposed elevations. So the middle picture there shows you the proposed extension to the rear. This is the existing floor plan of the property. And this is the proposed floor plan, so it shows the extension and then the seating area surrounding the proposed extension. So this is a view of the site from the Ballygassoon Road, so the extension obviously will be to the rear of the property, so it'll be limited views from this viewpoint. This is just where the extension's going on the back of the property. And again, that's just where the extension and then the seating area is proposed. That's a view of the existing garage, it's staying as is. And this is a view of the site from Ballygassoon Road, and again, you can see there's very limited views of the site, so the extension itself, views of it will be very limited. Concludes the presentation. Thank you, members.
Roisin, thank you very much for your presentation on the PowerPoint there. Members, this is a fairly straightforward application, and you've seen the report and the PowerPoint presentation. If there's any questions for Roisin, I'm happy to take them, but if you are content to move on to the decision stage, I am quite content to go there because, as I said, look, it's a very straightforward application, and if it hadn't been a council employee, this would be on the scheme of delegation. So if you are content, we'll just want to move to decision on this one, unless anybody's questions. Councillor Donnelly.
Just want to propose to accept the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Donnelly. Is there a seconder for this one? Alderman Kennedy. You beat you to it, Councillor Woodard, so thank you very much. Alderman Kennedy, are all agreed on that, members? Agreed. Thank you very much. Members, that was the last application of this evening, so thank you very much for your time, and it was a very informative meeting with some good questions and debates. So we'll close the meeting, and thank you very much. Come stop the